Hey everybody, welcome to another Midweek Conversation as we discuss this past Sunday's message, the follow-up readings, questions that came up after the message, anything like that. We always just kind of see where the conversation goes. And so this past Sunday, we were wrapping up Nehemiah, looking at 11, 12, and 13, those three chapters, and really just pulling a quick hit idea from chapter 11, a quick hit idea from chapter 12, and spending the majority of our time in 13 looking at, honestly, kind of the tragedy, and it turns around at the end, but the tragic results of people abandoning the covenant they made in chapter 10, and then Nehemiah's response when he sees broken covenant and how he addresses that and deals with that among the people and how the people respond. But yeah, so that's a series wrap on the book of Nehemiah. What you got? Questions from the sermon, the series, anything?
Yeah, I mean, looking... As we do sometimes, we'll use either the reflection question or in this case, there was a reflection question and an application from this week's sermon. And so such a big part of the sermon was the people breaking covenant and kind of falling back into multiple sins and breaking the covenant in multiple areas. And then Nehemiah genuinely violently and surprisingly correcting them. You know, like it even says in the one that he beat them and pulled their hair out, and it's just very violent correction of their covenantal breaking. But with that in mind, and reading Christ's example of where he says, "Cut it off," and I fully agree with you that I think when we try to call that verse hyperbole, it's a little bit of self-defense on our part. Of surely Jesus wouldn't actually want me to go without this thing, or surely Jesus wouldn't actually want me to be violent against my sin. Like surely it can stay in the corner or whatever. But again, that in mind, the application is looking for things to cut off. And so if we walk through the chapter, we see that they have to cut off bad religious practices, actual interpersonal relationships, and then things that kind of make them go without rest. And so we can kind of walk through those one by one. Sure. So say someone is using this application and they go, okay, I need to cut off a bad religious practice, whatever it may be. What do you think that looks like, going through that process of cutting it off?
I think it looks like what it was for Nehemiah as well. And so I won't just give the same answer every time. But specifically when it comes to religious practice and when it comes to all three of them, really, and how did Nehemiah deal with it even earlier in the chapter? How did, when we looked at Ezra, how Ezra dealt with it, to back up now to the start of Nehemiah and things, returning to the covenant standard. And so if there's a bad religious practice in our day today, in our life today, rather, return to the covenantal standard. And so if there's a bad religious practice of narcissistic, unbiblical prayers, well, cut those off, stop praying them. Okay, well then how do I pray? Great question. All right, go back to God's word, see how he teaches us to pray, right? Bad religious practice of a lack of discernment in what we read or listen to or anything like that. Okay, well then stop and return to the standards. That would be my kind of broad advice. Obviously, if somebody has a specific question, maybe it gets a little bit more particular for, hey, I'm doing this, but my broad response to a bad religious practice would be, well, identify what the Bible lays out as the actual practice and then do that instead.
Yeah. And I think taking from Nehemiah's example of, though the people accept the correction is ultimately brought about by a submission to leadership. And I think especially looking at bad religious practices, if you are falling into something that is unbiblical, that is leading you to neglect the house of God or to treat it with contempt, then you should be able to fall into line with leadership. And maybe it's leadership that's providing the bad example and you need to cut off and find other leadership. But it is Nehemiah who then leads the people in their violent cutting off of this covenantal breaking, Yeah,
and I would say ask that question of what got us here in the first place.
Yeah.
So if it's a bad religious practice of completely neglecting the local church, okay, well, what got me to this point? Well, I was at a church, I was committed to the church, I was passionately involved in the church, and then we got betrayed by leadership or we got hurt, and so then I kind of, okay, so maybe there's some unresolved stuff in your past that needs to be dealt with, Well, we got sick, so we missed church, and then we had a baby, so we missed church, and then honestly, we just got lazy and complacent
Yeah,
and
we got
I can do
used to
church on
missing
YouTube.
church.
You know what I mean? Like, okay, so then maybe you need to rediscover, like, so whatever it is, don't just stop doing it, but then also ask, okay, what were the steps that brought me to this place, so that you can also then avoid repeating those same steps, or if need be, you can go and you can address those root core issues. Because if you're just dealing at the surface level, that's just symptom management, and sooner or later you're going to revert back.
Yeah, like if you are someone who has problems with leadership and that's keeping you outside of the church, then simply going to a new church without resolving those issues, you're probably just a ticking time bomb for running into the same thing, or having that unresolved thing come back up and again drive you out of the church or distance you from people. So that's religious practices.
Okay.
We'll save relationships for last because I think it's last in the chapter anyway.
Yep.
So number 2, things that steal your rest.
Yeah.
Basically breaking, I mean, it says in Hebrews that there is still a day of rest for the believer.
Yep.
And so things that make us disregard God's covenant commands of rest and resting in him, you know.
This is the one that'll get people riled up. Your kid might need to quit that sports team. My parents pulled my brother from travel baseball because games were always Sundays. And if games weren't Sundays, practices were Sundays, because this wasn't the school team. And so you couldn't practice during the week because the school had practice, right? So it was like, and so my parents pulled my brother from travel baseball. And it was why? Because this will disrupt observing the Sabbath. And we're not going to do that. I was just telling a story yesterday. It's funny. We were just talking yesterday at church with some people about in high school, our soccer team. If we had a game on a Monday, there was a practice on Sunday. And the rule was if you didn't show up to the practice the day before a game, you couldn't play the first half. And so my freshman year and sophomore year, there was a small enough number of us on the team that were committed to church that coach wasn't willing to move the practice or anything. It was like, all right, well, practice is at 9 a.m. for the 3 of you who miss. Cool, you're not playing. Like, and then I think it was my junior year, like of the 11 starters, 8 of us were like, okay, well then we're not playing. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, well, maybe we can move the practice, right?
Yeah.
But that only came, and I'm not saying that it'll happen every time, but that only came because there were 8 parents. There were 8 sets of parents who were willing to say, all right, well then, and as a high schooler, I'll admit, I did not have the holy reaction. My reaction was like, guys, are you kidding me? Come on. It's like twice a year in the season that I need to skip church for soccer practice, right? And they were like, cool, that's twice too many. Like, no, we don't just casually set aside this when it's more convenient, right? And so what disrupts rest? The stuff we commit ourselves to, the hobbies we commit ourselves to, the sports we commit ourselves to. And I know that is not a popular conversation for people, but yeah, guess what? You might need to pull your kid off that sports team. You might need to say no to that group you're a part of, that traveling thing you're a part of, that thing you love to do, that you're good at, that brings you joy. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm saying if it's getting in the way, because ultimately, I mean, we're talking specifically about Sabbath rest, but ultimately what's the issue of it? Obedience to God's commands. So you can even take this to, if there's something that is actively, I'm not going to say it's causing you to disobey, because that thing has no power over you. Like, my soccer coach did not show up at my house and kidnap me and tie the cleats to my feet and drag me to practice, right? Like, my parents had the ability to say no to something, but there are things that facilitate our disobedience and exacerbate our disobedience. So the obedience or disobedience begins with us in our hearts, but there are things that exacerbate it, that we justify and things like that. And so whether it's talking specifically about Sabbath rest or something that's causing you to disobey God's command in general, you got to stop doing it. I think that's something that causes us to specifically write that cause us to disobey rest. If we're looking at the specific example of the people in Nehemiah with the Sabbath and observing the Sabbath, you might have to say no to activities. You might have to say no to your Savior complex, to your God complex. Well, I don't have a Savior God complex. Really? Because I hear a lot of Christians say something, well, if I don't get it done, nobody will. or nobody can get it done to the level I can get it done, right?
Yeah.
So why don't you rest? Well, because there's stuff that needs to be done, and then you know what? It goes undone.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, it goes undone, and you're probably going to live, and the people around you are probably going to live. If it's something that is truly life support, if you're watching this and you're a nurse in charge of somebody's like life support machine, I'm not saying you don't go in, right? Like, but except for that rare occasion where we're truly talking life or death, like, then it goes undone or it gets delayed. One of the things that has been best for my wife and I and our family is how fiercely, and I use that word fiercely very deliberately, how fiercely we guard Sabbath. Like what that has done for our hearts, our souls, our minds, our joy, our peace is just such a beautiful blessing. And so, you know what? Yeah, there are times where, man, that work really would have been nice to get it done that day. But you know what? It can wait till Monday, and I'll just have more work to do Monday. Yeah. Like it, because I'm going to guard rest. And so it ultimately comes down to, I guess I don't have very practical advice other than, what do you love more? Obeying God or fill in the blank? And if you love obedience to your Father more than you love this thing, it's really going to be a very easy decision. It becomes a hard decision when we want to share our heart.
Yeah. And I mean, I think sometimes we do have to reframe even what we think of as work, because we start to label stuff as like, well, that's my job. And this over here, this isn't work because I do it somewhere else. Or this isn't, this thing that eats up 80% of my time on my days off isn't actually eating up my time. It's like what I do on my days off. And we justify it to ourselves in that way of,
it's a hobby, it's an interest. Oh no, I'm not doing it at work. It's not work. It's look, we're commanded to rest. And I know that's even debated. I mean, there are churches who will tell you that no, there is no Sabbath day for the church today, and I just don't see it. But it comes back to, do you love obedience or do you love this thing more? Even if it's good work, volunteering, great work. Okay, well, if I'm working 5 days a week and then I'm doing this on this day, you know, like, you got to say no to stuff.
Yeah. And again, we see from Nehemiah's example that the things he cuts off could be arguably good for the people of Israel. It's economic gain for the people of Israel. And he very deliberately and violently goes, no, gates are closed. People aren't coming in to sell stuff. We're cutting this off.
I had this conversation not here in a previous place we lived, another city we lived in, lamenting. He's like, man, I remember the older guy. And he's like, I remember, right, like growing up, all the businesses were closed on Sundays. It was great. I was like, yeah. And he's like, now everybody's open on a Sunday. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, I wish they wouldn't be open. And I said to him, we were at church, and I just said to him, I was like, can I just make an observation? He's like, yeah. I was like, is that a fresh McDonald's coffee in your hand? He's like, yeah. And I stopped to get coffee. I said, so it's open so that people like you can go there. What if you didn't go there? And he's like, but like, that's what Nehemiah says to the people, right? Like, they're coming in to sell because you're showing up to buy. And stop showing up to buy. And then when they keep coming to sell, he's willing to say, no, don't be here to lead the people into temptation. Like, I'm going to lay hands on you. Back off. It's closed.
So that's rest as well. So probably the most difficult, because it is most likely to be the most emotional. I don't know, some people might list football over relationships, but probably the most emotional is, okay, I need to cut something off from my life. Oh wait, it's this friend, or it's this person, or it's this, these conversations I have. What do we do when it is a personal relationship,
Yeah, this is a big one. And I've had this conversation, unfortunately, a couple times with people. And I say unfortunately because I'm happy to have the conversation. And I'm grateful that people are working through this and really taking it seriously. But it's emotionally hard.
Yeah, it's a sad conversation.
It's a sad conversation. The reason I'm pausing is we may wind up doing a second video, so I can give it its full due time. But in short, I think you do at times have to cut people off. And when I say cut people off, I want to be very careful. I think there are times where it's okay to cut someone off entirely. Like, nope, contact over, right?
Yeah, toxic relationships, abusive relationships.
Absolutely. And I think there are times where you should cut someone's influence off without having to necessarily cut off the relationship entirely, right? Like there have been at every stage in my life, there have been people that I've interacted with who I am hoping to influence, but I have cut off their ability to influence me.
Right.
And my parents were good about this, even going back to high school. My parents were great about this, where it was like, look, be friends with that kid, right? Like be friends with that kid. Now your friendship's going to look like, no, we're not letting you go over to his house. No, we're not, right? Like if you guys want to hang out, you're doing it at our house.
Yeah.
Because we know what's going to happen at his house and what you're going to be exposed to at his house. That's not going to fly.
Right.
And so absolutely, there are times where you should cut people off entirely, contact over. And I think there's that middle room of, okay, I'm going to cut off your influence in my life.
Right.
But I'm not going to cut off the relationship entirely. This is definitely going to be we'll do a follow-up video that addresses specifically just this. But so within those three categories, I think you use some of the words for cutting someone off entirely. If it is abusive and harmful, you know, if you're looking at active harm, if you're looking at, okay, this relationship with this person is not passively, but actively harming me, whether it's any type of abuse or damage or anything like that. Okay, you don't have to, right? Jesus, this is a verse that gets taken out of context. You know, somebody hits you on the right cheek, turn and give them that, right? Like Jesus isn't saying you have to deliberately continue to place yourself into harm's way.
Yeah. That
is not what that verse is saying. And so if someone's in a relationship, I'll give a personal example that's not fun. There was a period of time where I refused to pick up phone calls from my grandma, and I wouldn't call her because she was she went through a lot, but she was alcoholic and she was angry when she was drunk. And so I tried to be a good grandson. I would call both sets of my grandparents, throughout college. But every time I called my grandma, she was drunk and would just start cursing me out. And it was like, yeah, I'm just not, I don't need to hear you bash my dad to me for 10 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need to hear you tear down my mom to me or tear down me, or like, so I just stopped calling her. I didn't enjoy it. I still loved her. I never stopped loving her. And then she recognized and she changed. And so it got to a point where I could talk to her again and we could have good conversations and healthy conversations. But there was a time where it was like, I'm not going to call just for you to be cruel for 20 minutes. Like, I feel no obligation to do that. So I think that's a big question to ask. You know, is there active harm being inflicted upon me? I think that's a big one. For the middle one, I'll give a quick answer of, is there any indication that I'm also influencing this person positively? And for this, I think you can go to, you've got numerous examples, right? Jesus talking to his disciples, if a town won't receive you, shake the dust off your feet, move on. Don't keep throwing pearls before swine. Like a dog to its vomit, a fool returns to his folly. And so one of the things that may indicate the needle tipping from category 2 of, okay, I'm not going to cut off relationship with you or interaction with you, I'm going to cut off your influence from my life, would be, because I think sometimes we hold on to relationships or friendships longer than maybe we should because we're telling ourselves, well, I'm changing them, and you're really not. Yeah. I've had friends at different times where I'm like, well, I'm changing them. And so I know it's not always the best conversation, but like I'm changing them when we hang out and realizing like, no, I'm actually not. Like nothing I'm saying it's just bouncing off and coming right back. Like there's been no change. There's, and that goes back to something I'll bring back, and this will be my last thought. This goes back to something from a previous question. Sometimes we have to check our God complex, right? Where I'm like, well, if I stop hanging out with Bennett, right now I'm thinking of Buddy from my life, right? Like if I stopped hanging out with Bennett and talking to him, nobody can reach him. Like I'm the only one who can have a different, and having it to a point where it's like, you know what, Lord, I trust you with Kiefer. Like I love him. He's my buddy, but I'm clearly not having any influence on him. and every time we get together, I'm having to fight against his possible influence on me. I'm not the only one who can save him, so I'm trusting him to you. And I think that's a question to help us. Okay, is this a category 2 person or an extreme category 3 person?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, balancing the fact, I think we have to be very aware of it and understanding, is this a battle? Like you said, am I battling their influence to try and insert any of my own? In which case, that should be an immediate red flag that you're probably more likely to be influenced than they are. Or, I mean, even in that extreme category, right, of is this purely negative? I don't even get a chance to insert any positive influence because it's just abusive and negative. All of it bringing us back to that inevitable conclusion of, do I actually need to, because we don't want to just be mean and hateful and like, well, you're not a Christian, so I'm cutting you off immediately.
The first time you disagree with me, well, delete them from my phone.
We want to be wise and prudent and even steward our time with people in a God-honoring way, which means that sometimes we do have to go, I'll still talk to you, but no, you can't have that position of influence because I need people who are going to influence me positively, you know?
Yep. Yeah, that'd be my quickest answer to that question.
Awesome.
But yeah, look for an expanded one. We'll spend a little bit longer on that specific question. It's a good question.
Yeah.
Cool. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts, we'd love to hear from you as always. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.
See you.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for a midweek conversation. If you missed this sermon that this related to, you can find it down below. Otherwise, if you want to make sure you stay up to date on all our content and resources, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.